Hi-ho, neighborinos. How are you? Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and it is episode number 44, if I am keeping a correct count here. And I've decided I'm going to turn the lights down just a little bit because I can. How's everybody doing out there? Hope you're all having a great week. I'm having a great week. I am adjusting to the new reality of my new life as the proprietor of a website. And it is a different story, getting up every day and making sure there's an update at least every day, hopefully trying to do 2 a day, but at least 1 a day. So that's been really been a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed working on that quite a lot. We mentioned last week that there's quite a bit of lag here, and it seems for some reason or another that the lag between what I'm transmitting and what I see back, which means what I get back in the comments stream here for those of you watching live on Ustream, is getting longer and longer. It seems like it's probably 45 seconds now. But if you type a comment into the comment stream while you're watching the show live and you don't hear a response, now you know why. Anyway, it's great to be here. It's been, as I say, a very busy week. It's been the first week that I've had a chance to, I can't say I've had a chance to relax because I haven't really had any time off or anything, but it's been the first week since we've been officially open, so that meant it was the first week really where I wasn't doing, 24-hour days. And that is, that's a bit of a break for me. So I'm real happy about that. So what we did this week, it's different, is something I think we're probably just going to keep doing. I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier. Somebody suggested it last week. We tried it with Afterburner. Rather than me going through and picking the questions that I like, I just committed to doing the top-rated questions. I think we'll probably do that, and I think we mentioned last time that we'll do that, and then maybe give me 2 or 3 wild cards that I can pull just because I like the feel of them. So we got a big show tonight, and I can't stay super late. So let's get started and see what we can come up with here. I'll tell you what, though. Once I agreed to do the top-rated answers, I took a look at the questions and I thought, this is going to be great. So let's start with number 1 at the time when I closed the comments, and that's Andy Schnick asking, what do you think of Mark Levin's Liberty Amendments proposal? What an awesome question for the first go-round of the highest ranked question idea. What do I think of Mark Levin's Liberty Amendments proposal? Andy, I don't have a clue. I just don't know. I haven't read them. I'm a huge fan of Mark Levin, but I don't get a chance to listen to a lot of radio. In fact, I don't get a chance to listen to any radio. I don't get a chance to read as much political commentary as much as I can or would like to. I used to really just enjoy reading a lot more than I do today. I used to like Mark Stein very much. I still do, obviously. But I haven't read his Liberty Amendments. I haven't read the book. I guess that's the new book. And I am unable to answer this first question because I just don't know what they are. But I took it because it was the number 1 ranked question. And I also took it because obviously I need to read it. I need to get a look at it. I've heard nothing but great things about it. Mark Levin is a giant. And I was lucky enough to have introduced him at a couple of different events, and to be recognized by Mark Levin and to be complimented by Mark Levin is a heck of a compliment. And let me just say one more thing about this before I move on, because obviously I just can't answer it. I mentioned this several times. When you get right down to it, doesn't it surprise and amaze you? It doesn't surprise you maybe, but amaze you that when you get to the people who are on our side of the issues, the people who are our gladiators that we send into the ring on Team Red, doesn't it? And I hate that name, Team Red. Why couldn't we have blue like we're supposed to, and let the communists have red like they're supposed to? Anyway, when I think about the people that go into battle on our side, I think of guys like Mark Levin and Rush Limbaugh and Victor Davis Hanson and Thomas Sowell, giants, intellectual giants. They're just incredibly bright people. They're shockingly intelligent people. And when I think about who they put out on the field, I get guys with like Bill Maher and Janine Garofalo and Alec Baldwin and Jon Stewart, and Steve Colbert. And these guys are snark merchants. I think if you were to take a look at our team versus their team, I think we got 20 IQ points on them. And I don't know if I ever talked to you guys. I think I might have done it maybe 5, 6, 7 shows ago. Anybody, I don't know if I remember I had this conversation, but I had an interesting discussion with Jeremy one day about a theory that I have called Island 120. And that's probably being generous. Let's call it Island 115. I have a theory, and my theory is that the reason that so many liberals believe exactly the same thing is because it is what their cohort believes, and that what they're trying to do is they're trying to look smart. And so when they hear guys like Jon Stewart and Bill Maher and all these guys who top end have an IQ of 120, everybody wants to talk like them. Everybody wants to believe what they believe. Everybody wants to vote Obama. Everybody's all about Obamacare. Everybody thinks it's marvelous and really bright and intelligent and all this other stuff. Because basically you got people who are, 100 IQ, 80s and high 90s, 80s, not 80s, high 90s, hundreds and fives, hundreds and tens, trying to sound like they're at an IQ of a 120. They're trying to get onto Island 120. And so they all talk about the same. And when you look at the Bill Maher show, especially, that one comes to mind. It's true for the Daily Show as well. What snark is sneering at people who are dumber than you. So the Daily Show will do a segment about some guy who may be a real religious guy and he's building a rocket in his garage or something, and they just go there and mock him, and they do a lot of that through the editing as well. So they just mock people and try to convince them that conservatives are stupid, and they all get together and laugh, and they snark. Now, they don't provide any philosophy, they don't provide any theory, they don't provide any sense of why they're smarter than anybody else. They just they find people that are easy to mock, and they mock them. And that's snark, and snark is not philosophy. And so I think everybody does it because they all want to appear smart to each other, and this is what people around an IQ of 120 think is smart. I think Barack Obama probably has an IQ between 110 and maybe 115 top end, somewhere in that ballpark. When you get to Harvard Law School, however, you're not surrounded by people with 110 IQs trying to sound like they got 120 IQs. When you get to Harvard Law, you're surrounding people with 130, 140 IQs, 135, which is why Barack Obama never wrote any law reviews for Harvard Law. He probably did write a couple, and they were unpublishable because they were so banal. And so if you get to the point I'm trying to make here, you take a guy like Antonin Scalia or Thomas Sowell. These guys don't have anything to prove as far as their IQ is concerned. They're not guys who are like having to show everybody they're smarter than everybody else. They know they're smarter than everybody else. They don't care if they are standing alone out there with a theory that no one else believes, because they've given this nothing but deep thought for a long time. And then, and so they don't care. So while I think everybody on the left is trying to look up to Island 120 and act the same and talk the same so that they can get onto Island 120, when you get guys like Thomas Sowell and Mark Levin with their political theories, then Island 120 is way behind them in the rearview mirror. They don't have to look up for Island 120. They look back on Island 120. They look down on it basically and say, you guys actually believe this stuff? You can't see how ridiculous this is? You can't see how unworkable it is? Don't you see that there's no evidence for this? Can't you see all the contrary evidence? Well, you're all alone out there, man. You're a conservative and you're hateful and mean. Guy with an IQ of 130, 140 looks at this and says, I don't care what you think about me. It's obvious that it's not true. It's obvious. So that's my theory. My theory is that our guys, champions on our team, have got 20, 25, 30 IQ points on the people that tell themselves how smart they are and tell you how smart they are, which is why you never hear Thomas Sowell say, hey, look how smart I am, or Mark Levin say, I don't know, maybe Mark Levin does. Most people who understand the limits of their own intelligence don't brag about how smart they are, and they don't make fun of other people for being stupid. They understand, as I've come to understand, that no matter how smart you are, you meet anybody in a Walmart, that person knows 100 things more than you do. 100 things, they are better versed in at least 100 things than you are. it's a typical case where you get to a certain level of intelligence, you begin to realize how limited your intelligence is. But that's why we don't have snark. We have philosophy. We have arguments. We have Mark Levin, and we have Thomas Sowell, and we have Victor Davis Hanson, and we have Rush Limbaugh. We have giants. And the more I consider this philosophy, the more sense it makes, and the more things fit into place. And when I find something that doesn't fit into place, I usually have to go and challenge my assumptions and ask myself, why isn't this fitting in? And it usually turns out there's some assumption that I made. And as I've said 100 times, somebody comes up to me with a compelling argument that is backed up by facts and reason and logic. I'll change my mind. I'm not a conservative because I'm a conservative. I want to be a conservative. Then I go looking for evidence. I'm a conservative because the evidence of life is conservative. Anyway, so sorry about that, Andy. Sorry about that for the number one question. I can't comment really on Mark Levin's Liberty Amendments. I'll bet they're brilliant. I'm going to have to read them, so maybe we can pick it up again. Moving on, Kevin Kilcoyne says, waffles, Belgian or square? Okay, you asked for offbeat. That was our second most popular question. I'm going to go with Belgian on this one. They seem to be lighter and fluffier. Thanks for asking. Question number 3. Elisa Lee Gossage. Sorry. Elisa Lee maybe Leah. Elisa Leah Gossage, if I had to guess. Asks, off the beaten path. Good. Having suffered from it yourself, what advice do you have for those who suffer from depression? That's a great question. I'll take that in a minute. Just let me have a sip of water so I can weep silently to myself here off camera. I got to keep the tear ducts lubricated. Hang on a sec. First thing I think you have to do if you're going to give advice to people who suffer from depression is you got to be able to joke about it. It's certainly not an insight of mine. I don't think anybody who's ever looked at people who are funny has not come to this conclusion without, I won't say without question, but with very, very few exceptions. People who are funny are usually funny because they've got a lot of pain and misery that they've been dealing with through their comedy. That a sense of humor is not only used to defend themselves against the insecurities they have, but it's actually a form of self-medication for depression. I know the only way to get me out of a deep funk is to make me laugh. And if you can break through the funk and actually get me to laugh, it's virtually all over. It's a very, very serious question, and I'm happy to answer it as honestly as I can. I try to answer everything I answer as honestly as I can. Look, for the first, I started to get the symptoms of this probably around age 15, 16, somewhere in that ballpark. I have no memory of being depressed when I wanted to be a pilot, when I wanted to fly for the Air Force. When I got the vision test news that I wasn't going to be able to be a pilot, that's the first time I can remember really being sad for a long time. But I don't think they're related. I think that's just the onset of age. I think right around 17 years old is when it starts to hit for most people. And for me, most of my life, the depression was really a bipolar kind of thing. I would be very excited, euphoric, walking on air about things, and then something would happen and I'd just go down. It's a hard thing to explain to people. But really what happens for people who are depressed is they've had some kind of a major parenting failure. They had a lack of, they had something important missing. And I'm not going to get into those details only because it's not me. I can talk about myself all I want to. I don't want to say things about my parents without their permission. I just don't find that appropriate. But suffice it to say that most people who suffer from depression or large anxieties didn't get something. And what they don't get, Elisa, is they don't get a sense of self-worth. There's something about their parenting, either with one parent or both, that is very difficult for people who were adequately parented to understand. They won't understand it. They never will. They can't connect to it. Likewise, people who've never had this can't connect to the normal experience. They just wish they had it. What it comes down to, though, is if you are neglected or deprived or abused. I was never abused. you, as an infant, from the moment your personality starts to form, you do not have a sense of self-worth that's comparable with other people's. There's just something missing. You feel like there's something wrong with you. And so you begin to find strategies to cope with this unbearable feeling of not being good enough or not being worth enough. And so what a lot of people do, certainly what I did, is you start to do what I call a dog and pony show. Everything in your life becomes about what you do. It's not about who you are, it's about what you do. And so even before the depression really started to sink in, I was okay in school. And I remember my dad said, "You're just going to have to do better." And okay, if that's what it takes to get some attention, then that's what I'll do. So after I had that lecture, I was first in my class every year for 4 times a year for 6 years in Bermuda. It was just extremely competitive. It was a dog and pony show. Now, on some level, that dog and pony show has done me an awful lot of good. It got me interested in things that I continue to be interested in. But I think you'll find most people who suffer from clinical depression will tell you that it's not just, oh, I'm upset that my wife left me, or some other perfectly good reason to be upset. Clinical depression, people who are depressed for life, I don't know of any exceptions, are missing a sense of internal well-being that is provided by close physical contact and loving care from your parents. And depressives don't get it. They didn't get it. And here's the sad news for those who have depression. And I've only learned this through a lot of therapy. The bad news is this sense of self-worth is never going to be embedded in you in the way that it is in normal people. You can have it, but it's never going to be there. It's never going to be built into the walls. It's going to be a brace. You can apply a brace, but it's just not going to be that way. You're just never going to get it. You can't go back. Everybody's personality is formed really between the ages of 1 and 5. By the time you're 5 years old, the essential part of your personality is already in place. That's why if you have kids who are raised relatively well from the ages of 1 to 5, they can suffer all kind of turmoils and anxieties and traumas and come out more or less okay. So the first thing I would say to people who since being asked about this advice for depression, the first thing I would say is that you have to understand that you're not ever going to be back in that place where normal people are. You're not. You're stuck with it. It's like being born with diabetes or some other congenitive problem. You're just stuck with it. That's not the end of the world, though. So I woke up one day when I was in it started to hit me in high school. Then as I got into college, it got really, really bad. I felt really isolated from my social group. I'd gone to all boys school in Bermuda, so when I came to Miami, not only didn't I have a lot of experience with girls, I didn't have any experience with the specific girls. So when people started going out, and you had to screw up your courage, to ask a girl out on a date, I hadn't spent any time with girls at all. I mean, none. And most of the people who were learning how to do this when I came over not only had grown up with girls in school every day, but they'd grown up with the same girls. They'd known, the person they ask out to the prom, half the time they've known since they were, 4. So that train kind of accelerated away from me. I wasn't closing the gap, I was actually getting further away. By the time I got to college, I think my self-image was so bad that I don't know how I held it together. I know I never did drugs and I never did alcohol, probably because I'd seen the effects of alcohol and been warned about drugs. And I really do believe that the only reason I got through it without falling into a pit of drug and alcohol abuse is because I was pretty sure that if I started going down that road, I wasn't coming back. So I just didn't. I slept a lot, had an enormous fantasy life, real active imagination. I used to play like Traveler and which is kind of a sci-fi Dungeons and Dragons. Do anything I could to kind of escape from the pain of it and medicate myself through sleeping or whatever I would do. But I can remember very clearly in college, I would be out at the Windjammer, which was our dive at the University of Florida, where we'd all go after rehearsals or after a show, and we'd just sit there in the back room, a bunch of actors, and I was starving. I was really genuinely starving. I was 6'1". I'm still 6'1". I weighed 119 pounds. I had no money. I had nothing to eat. I was like, if I could find $2 to get a hamburger, that was like a good day. So I would be in a room full of people, and I'd be in a good mood. I'd be happy, and everybody's laughing and happy and joking. And then somebody would say something, maybe not even to me, but even if it was about me, it didn't even have to be anything bad. It wasn't like I overheard an insult or something. So what happened was I would hear something, and in the space of about, honestly, 60 seconds, I would just collapse. My personality would just come down like watching a building being demolished. 60 seconds after being there happy, joking with people, I'd just be sitting there staring at the table, and people say, "What's the matter?" "Nothing." "You okay?" "I'm fine." And the more I thought about it, and the more people noticed that I was upset, and the more upset it made me. And usually within 3 or 4 minutes, I got to go, and I just get up and go. One time somebody drove me over there from from my house, and I said, "I got to go." And they said, "What do you mean you got to go?" I said, "I got to go." I said, "It's 4 miles home. I'll take you home. I mean, you don't have to take me home. I don't want you to leave. I'll just go. I just walk home 4 miles in the middle of the night in Gainesville." And part of it is you want people to know that you're upset. You want people to know that you're hurting. It's a signal you send out. But really, it's not manipulation. It's not like if you cared about none of that. Just like, I got to go. And so I was bipolar and moody like that pretty much all the time for virtually my entire life. One day I woke up when I was 25 years old. I just had done a feature film, and it was a flaming wreckage catastrophe in terms of the shoot, in terms of what we ended up with, in terms of the finances. It was the Hindenburg. It was steel girders falling around and people running around with their skin on fire, kind of catastrophe. And I was 25. Sorry, I was 27. It was in 1985. 26? Yeah. It was 1985. I was 26 years old. And I just woke up one day crying. I just woke up crying. And I called my mom, who worked at a clinic, and she said, "Okay." I think that she finally heard me. I mean, she knew I was unhappy for 10 years, 15, 20 years, but this really got through. So when I was 26, I started getting into therapy. I started getting into behavioral therapy, and at the time, I wanted a magic pill. And they told me there wasn't one. And there was a counselor in Miami named Shotzi Casal. And I went in there the first time, and I was working in a nightclub, and I walked in with my big shoulder pad jacket, and had my my thin tie on, my little satin tie, and I must have been either going to work. I think that must have been it. Anyway, I go in there. And she told me later, she didn't tell me this day because we got to be good friends. She told me later that you came in and you were so pale and so thin, you were almost blue. I thought you were a vampire. But the thing about it, Elisa, was when I finally got into that therapist's office, and bless that woman, I was so defensive and so angry and so, I said, "I can't, I don't even know why I'm here. I can't possibly pay for this." She said, well, what do you mean you can't pay for it?" "I can't pay for it. I don't have any money. I'm not making any money." "Well, can you pay $5 a visit?" I said, "Well, yeah, I can pay $5 a visit." She said, "Okay, I'll charge you $5 a visit. Then you make more money. We'll talk about it then." That person saved my life. So you start looking at things, and when you're that deep, you don't even have the psychic strength to really even been there, to even really look. You just know you can't go on like this. You just know you don't want to. Now, in Narcotics Anonymous, they talk about this and they call it hitting bottom. But I will tell you this, Elisa. The day I went in to a therapist for the first time, I was so miserable that if that woman had said to me, you need to go out on a golf course at midnight during a full moon, paint yourself blue, strip naked, and dance around 7 times counterclockwise, shaking a holly leaf over your head, I would have done it. I would have done anything. I would have done anything to get out of where I was. So I went in for this hour, and folks, by the time I got in there, you would not have recognized me. So by the time this hour was over, and it was time for me to leave, that's not enough medicine. I needed to live there, because even in my first visit, it was starting to help. Somebody was talking to me about it. I got the sense, at least, my God, things are so horrible, but at the very least, I'm starting something. I'm doing something. And so as I was walking out of there, this woman, Shotzi, said to me, there's one more thing I want you to do. And I said, what? She said, I want you to go to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. And I looked at her and I said, really? She goes, yeah. And I actually laughed. I said, look, I'll be willing to admit that I have every single emotional and mental problem on the face of the earth. I'm happy to admit that. I'm ready to change. But the only problems, it seems to me, in the entire world that I do not have are a drinking problem and a drug problem. Those are the only two that I do not have. I do not have a problem with drinking, and I do not have a problem with drugs. I'd go out twice a month with friends and have a beer. I'd probably been roaring drunk twice in my entire life. And that's only because I was out with friends at a party. I'd never, and still to this day, have never bought alcohol for myself to consume at home. I have a fair amount of single malt scotch in my closet at home, but that was given to me by other people. And I've bought alcohol for other people, but I've never bought alcohol for myself to consume at home. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just letting you know. So she said, yeah, I know. But you need to go to this thing anyway. And I was just so angry. One of the things you can find about depressives, Elisa, is that depression is caused by rage. It's caused by suppressed anger. It's not a depression problem. It's an anger problem. And so I sullenly said, okay, whatever. And she gave me a pamphlet or something. Find a meeting near where you are. I'll see you again on Thursday. This was on a Tuesday. But I want you to go to a meeting tonight. I want you to go to a meeting on Wednesday night. And I said, okay. So I got out of there. And I almost said I got out of there and I got on my phone. But we didn't have cell phones. I got out of there. I went back to the office, I guess, back somewhere home. I don't remember where I was. But then I called a friend of mine named Suzanne Donzella, who was a friend and one of the best friends I've ever had. Still a very close friend of mine. She lives in Florida. And Suzanne and I had been very close, and she'd been the only person who really cared about me, really, really cared about me. And so she and I used to go out for ice cream and just hang out and go to movies and stuff, just as friends. And so after I got out of that first therapy session, I called her up. Maybe she probably called me, come to think of it. She said, how'd it go? I said, it was all right. I guess. You going to go back? Oh, yeah, I'll go back. I don't know. And I said, and this woman wants me to go to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting tonight. And this was about quarter to 7 at night, something, when I finally talked to her. And she said, well, why are you talking to me? Why aren't you on your way to the meeting? I'm not going to go tonight. What do you mean you're not going to go tonight? It's like, it's already, it's quarter to 7. It's too late. I'm not going to go tonight. And Suzanne Donzella said to me, she said, okay, don't go. I just previously I said, yeah, I'm not going. Why don't we just go out to Swenson's and get us some ice cream or something? I'll tell you about the day. And she said, no, we're not going to Swenson's tonight. We're not going for ice cream tonight. We're not going to a movie tonight. Matter of fact, we're never going out again until you go to these meetings. And I said, you're what now? She said, we are never going out again until you go to these meetings. I can hardly talk about this without crying because it's about the kindest thing anybody ever did to me or for me. So I said, are you serious about this? She said, I'm damn serious about it. And if I were you, I'd get going to that meeting right now because I'm hanging up the phone. And she did. And I thought, okay. So I went to this Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and I sat there with my arms and legs crossed, a little 26-year-old ball of fury and rage and sadness. And it was a new members meeting, and I listened to the whole Narcotics Anonymous thing, and I just sat there scowling, and I just said, I don't belong here. Went the second night because not because I wanted to go to the meeting. I went the second night because after the meeting I wanted to go out with my friend and have a laugh, because that's about the only thing I had in my life that meant anything, that was any fun. And the second meeting I go there, and they're saying, oh, hey, really great to see you. And I said, I'm only here because somebody told me to come. I don't have a drug problem. I just want you to know that. And they went, sure you don't have a drug problem. Nobody here has a drug problem. But the third night, I went not to a new member thing. Third night I went to just a regular 12-step program. And I think it was step 1 for Narcotics Anonymous. And I'm in the room and at a church. I hadn't been in a church in 15 years. In, the kind of back, reception room of a church, where they have all the activities. And there's coffee and cookies there, and I walk in, and I'm looking at my shoes, and no one ever paid any attention to me. I'm just a scowling little... Somebody once described me as a downed power line that just kind of just sparked around on the floor. Just stay clear of this thing. So I go in, and I'm used to just, sitting in a corner for the last 10 years of my life, fuming about something or other, and certainly not expecting anybody to talk to me. But a bunch of people did. They came up and talked to me. Hey, how are you? How you doing? Fine. What do you want to know? What a lovely guy. So anyway, so this is my third Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and I'm sitting there in this room, this circle full of people, and everybody's going around saying hi. I'm not saying boo. And across the room, I can still remember where I was sitting. This would be 1986, 87, 85. Sorry, yeah. I remember where I was sitting in the circle. I remember where this other guy's sitting in the circle. Black man who's probably about 35 years old, named James, stood up. I never saw him since, by the way. Only saw him at that one meeting. And James basically raised his hand and said, "Hi, I'm James. I'm an addict." And I said, "Hi, James." And he said, "Yeah, it's not been a really good week for me. I just stay in the apartment and I don't pick up the phone. I let everything go to the answering machine, and I just monitor my calls, and people are calling to ask how I'm doing, and I don't pick up, and I don't call them back. I just sit there and monitor the calls, and I don't have the rent money, and the guy's banging on my door for rent, and he knows I'm in the apartment, and I know that he knows that I'm in the apartment, but I still don't answer the door, and I'm just terrified of everything, and I'm just miserable all the time. I sleep all the time, and when I wake up, it's the middle of the night, and I just eat Coke and potato chips and go back to sleep, and I don't know, I'm not doing real well." And he went on like this for about 30 minutes, 5-6 minutes, something like that. So while he's talking, I had the sensation that I'll never forget either. I had a sensation that my shoes were so hot that they were melting the linoleum. I had a sensation that the balls of my feet, the soles of my shoes, were literally melting the linoleum. That I was almost in little puddles of melted linoleum. My feet were so hot. And after that guy finished talking, something possessed me. And I raised my hand, and they'd seen me at a couple meetings, or some of them had. I raised my hand, and I said, "Hi, I'm Bill, and I don't know why I'm here. I don't have a drinking problem. I don't have a drug problem. But that man over there just told my life story. That is exactly my life. That's exactly precisely it. And so maybe I belong here after all." And people were real supportive, and after the meeting I got up. They said, "Anybody else want a white chip?" If you've never been to a 12-step program, they use poker chips. And the poker chips are used to symbolize the amount of time that you've got. And I'll get to time in a minute. And so getting a white chip meant that you are going to get up in front of this group of people and start. It means you're serious about starting instead of just sitting in at the meeting. And I said, "White chips." A couple people went up and got white chips. "Anybody else?" And I just sat there for a second. I was just terrified. And I finally just got up and did. I walked up and got my little white chip, and everybody clapped, and it was great. In Narcotics Anonymous, I'm positive this is Alcoholics Anonymous as well. They just give you a little poker chip. It's just a little white poker chip. It's what's worth less than a penny, right? It's a little piece of plastic. And this indicates that that you started in this 12-step program. And for those of you who are still in 12-step programs or who are in it more recently than I was, forgive me for not remembering this, but I'm fairly certain that after a week you got a blue chip, and after a month you got an orange chip, or maybe it was after 1 month you got a blue chip, and then an orange after 2, and then a red after 3, something like that. But it was like a colored belt in karate. And I remember when I went up after a month or whatever, I got my blue chip. I was proud as can be. And it wasn't hard for me to keep building time wasn't hard for me because I didn't have an addiction to a substance. For guys who've been doing drugs their whole life, to go 4 days without a drug or without a drink it's incredible. It was easy for me not to go for a week or a month or 2 months or 9 months without a drink or without drugs because I didn't do drink or drugs. But what I learned, and the reason I'm telling you all of this, Elisa, is that I had an addictive personality, and I guarantee you that anybody you know who is depressed their whole life, they're depressed because they have an addictive personality. That addictive personality disorder, depression, they're all tied together. There's a fair amount of anxiety involved. All this stuff is all part of the same symptom, and it all comes from the same place. So it's not like you have an alcohol addiction or a drug addiction or a gambling addiction or a sex addiction or a food addiction. It doesn't matter. That's why the 12-step programs work across all these different things. It's not like an alcoholic has got a different disease from a drug addict or a different disease from a gambling addict. It's the same problem. It's the same problem. It's just that they found different things to medicate themselves, something to get them out of this addiction. And addictive personalities are addictive personalities, and they can't function, and they're depressed because they don't have any sense of self-esteem. They don't have any sense of self-worth, and so they look for something to fill this gigantic hole. And if you're drunk, you don't have to feel the hole, and if you're high, you don't have to feel the hole, and if you're on that gambling rush, you don't have to feel that hole, and and all the rest of these things. So I went to these meetings, and then I went every day. And like everything else, looking back on it, I suppose you could say that I was on a Narcotics Anonymous dog and pony show. If I'm going to be depressed and if I'm going to be a Narcotics Anonymous, then all right, I'll come in first place in Narcotics Anonymous. And people actually liked me. They liked everybody. But they liked me a lot because I actually had a sense of humor. It was about the only defense I had. And I would get up in front of a group of people and I'd say, listen, I'm telling you right now, I've been in Narcotics Anonymous for 6 days. I plan to set the world land speed record for recovery. I'm going to have my picture on the cover of the next Narcotics Anonymous newsletter. And everybody laughed. And I had one more thing that really helped me at the time, Elisa, and this is also part of 12-step programs, is I had a sponsor. And a sponsor, obviously, is somebody who you don't just walk in and get assigned a sponsor. It's not like you walk in, here's your white chip, here's your sponsor. You have to pick your sponsor, and your sponsor has to pick you. So after I'd been there for a while, I don't know, 5-10 meetings, something like that, I had been to enough meetings and seen enough people that there were a bunch of people who I thought really I admired. They looked like they had it together. Now my sponsor is, I hope he's still around. I haven't seen him in 25, 30 years. But his name was Kevin. And I don't know what his last name was. Kevin had been a financial guy in New York City. This was 1985, remember? So he was a financial guy up in New York City and was making, I don't know, $300,000-$400,000 a year in 1985. And he snorted all his money away. Then he snorted his family away, snorted his wife away, snorted his apartment away, snorted his whole life away, just snorted it away. And he was gone, and he had made such a wreck of his life that he couldn't get rehired. His reputation as a cokehead was everywhere. He simply snorted himself out of that life. And he obviously wasn't very happy with that life, or else he wouldn't have done so much cocaine. So Kevin moves to Miami, and he became my sponsor because he was funny, and I liked him. And I was the only person in Narcotics Anonymous working in a nightclub. Everybody, it was kind of scandalous if you think about it, because I'm working in a nightclub in Miami in 1985, and there was no place on earth where you could get more cocaine and alcohol than a nightclub in Miami in 1985. But I'm not at risk because I never had that problem. So since I worked in a nightclub, I would get there at 10 o'clock at night. That was about my call time. I'd get the lights, more or less set, and change some gels on the lights and pump some fog juice into those smoke machines, and we'd open the doors around 10:30, 11, and we wouldn't get started till 12, midnight. I wouldn't get out of there till 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. That's why I have no hearing left, by the way, and why I have terrible tinnitus is because I spent 2 years, 3 years unprotected in front of walls of speakers, that were 12 feet high. I just blew my hearing out. Anyway, I would usually get all worked up about some girl I was obsessed about or something like that, and I would go over and visit my sponsor, Kevin. So my sponsor, Kevin, who used to be a $400,000 a year Wall Street guy, is working as the attendant at a Gulf station on Dixie Highway. He was pumping gas. And I would go over at about 7:30, 8 o'clock, and I'd just say, "Hey, how's it going?" He says, "Hang a second, let me finish checking this guy's oil." No kidding. That's really what he said. And then he'd come over, and we'd sit down and chat, wait till the next car pulled up that needed help or whatever. We'd sit and talk for an hour. And I'd come in all, head about to explode, hair on fire, as usual. And Kevin would just sit me down and say, hey, what? Just stop. Just stop. Are you, you have a place to sleep tonight? I said, yeah. You haven't been kicked out of your apartment or anything? No, I'm paying the rent. What about food? You hungry? There's a Burger King across the street. I got $5. You want to go get a sandwich? No, I'm good. I had dinner before I left. So you got a place to sleep? Yep. You don't need anything to eat? Nope. He says, then everything else is not important, Bill. It just doesn't matter. What are you worried about? What's the big deal? And that kind of talking really helped me. But the main thing about Narcotics Anonymous, Elisa, was it was emergency room treatment. I went every single day. I went to a meeting every single day. And during the holidays, I would go 3 times a day. And it meant that every single day I could go in and talk to people who understood what I was going through. They understood the depression. They understood the loneliness. They understood the desperation. They understood the fear, the anxiety. They understood all of it. They're all getting it. And for those of you who this is doing any good for, I can tell you this. Prior to going to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, when I was told I should go to one, I thought I was going to be sitting in a room full of the stupidest, dimmest, most inert losers I had ever met in my life. But speaking from my own personal experience, I have never been in a room full of people who are funnier, brighter, more sensitive, and more interesting than those drug addicts that I hung out with in Narcotics Anonymous, because they were addicts. They were sensitive people who just couldn't keep it together. And, Narcotics Anonymous had so many great little sayings, little expressions that I still keep with me. One of them was, you get defensive, you go into one of these rooms and you'd be like, I don't even know why I'm here, blah, 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 blah. And they'd say, hey, man, if things are working out so well for you, what are you doing in this room here? There's really not much argument about that. And they would say things like, fear is false expectations accepted as real. It's so much of what you're afraid of and so much about you're worried of and so much that you feel that you can't handle. It's just you preparing yourself to go into combat with these things because life is so chaotic for you because you don't have a sense of self and you always constantly have to be ready to defend yourself. And the next thing you know, all the things you're ready to defend yourself against don't happen. They never happened. So anyway, did Narcotics Anonymous for about a year. And then I started getting better. And some people didn't want me to leave. Some people said that's your disease speaking. It's trying to keep you away from it. Some addicts get addicted to Narcotics Anonymous. That's better than being addicted to drugs. I moved into an apartment with 2 other addicts. It was great. I had so much fun. I really did. I had a lot of fun. I miss those days on some level. I really do. Anyway, So, the therapy helped for a while, and then around 1993, Elisa, this is what, almost 8 years later, I went back to the same therapist. Still had some real problems, and she said, "I remember I told you there was no magic pill for this." I said, "Yeah." She says, "Well, maybe there is," and I said, "Really?" She says, "Yeah. I want you to try this medication called Prozac." I said, "Does this help?" And she goes, It may." So I got a prescription for Prozac, and I took that Prozac tab around 6 o'clock in the evening. And Prozac takes a while to come up. It's not like an aspirin pill that kicks in an hour. You really get Prozac on your system. It takes, days, 5-10 days sometimes to really come up full strength. But I took that pill at 6 o'clock at night, and I woke up the next morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I remember as clear as day, as clear as I'm sitting before you right now, I remember waking up at 9 o'clock that next morning and saying, oh, so this is what it's like. This is what it's like. This is what it's like to be a normal person. This is what it's like to be okay. My serotonin levels were so low, I guess I was just, might as well have been chewing the paint off the walls. Even that early, it made a difference. So antidepressants really do work. The best analogy I can use for antidepressants, and by the way, Prozac's extremely primitive compared to today. The best analogy I can use for people who don't have this problem is people who are not clinically depressed think that Prozac or antidepressants are a happy pill, that they somehow make you happy. Like, oh, you're sad? Well, guess what? I'm sad. I got fired too. Maybe I should take some Prozac. No, it's nothing like that at all. Prozac stabilizes your mood, doesn't make you happy. So the best way I think about it is, if you imagine that your emotional swings are like a pendulum, right? And if you're a normal person, something bad happens to you. Somebody says something mean. Something hits you. Somebody knocks you off a balance. If you're a normal person, you swing, and then you swing back, and and that's what it does. If you're depressive, somebody says something, and you go way over here, and then you go way back over here. You're way over. It's like all Prozac does is it doesn't make you not feel sad. It doesn't make you feel happy. It keeps the emotional response more or less in balance, more or less reasonable. Manageable is probably the best word. And the way I describe it to people is, look, if I was a diabetic and I didn't take insulin, and I went down onto the ground into a diabetic coma and had a seizure, and you gave me an insulin injection and I got better, that wouldn't be something I would have to be particularly ashamed of, is it? No, of course not. You have a biological deficiency. You're just not making enough insulin. Okay. I'm not making enough serotonin, and so I need some help. And once you get those serotonin levels up, it is enormously effective. But I won't go all night with this, although I think it's probably an interesting subject. So let me just kind of close this whole thing up, Elisa, by saying this about about not your depression or whatever you happen to know about depression. It really is a combination of two things. You really have to do two things. You have to get the medication, because the medication will get you stabilized mentally, will get your mood stabilized. For people who are not depressed, they can't relate to this, but if you have depression, you certainly can. Depression, medical depression, clinical depression, is like weather. It's like emotional weather. It doesn't matter what's happening to you in your life. The little stimuli in your life, more or less constant. Sometimes you get cut off in traffic. Sometimes you get a raise. That's fine. But when this is a medical issue, sometimes it comes in like a storm and it blows for 4 days. And I'm still susceptible to this. Probably once every 2 months or so, it'll just hit. And now I've gotten so good at dealing with it, it's like I don't worry about it anymore. It's like, okay, it's going to be a rough 3 days, and I'm just going to sit still. I'm going to relax. I'll probably just veg out and watch TV because I know it's going to pass. It's just weather. It's the weather. There's nothing I can do about it. Even with the medications, the weather still comes. So the medication is important, and the medications get better and better and better. But the important thing, Elisa, is the therapy, because by the time you're old enough to have functional language, you've already got problems. And so this is the second part of what you have to do. If I was going to give somebody recommendations for treatment, in fact, I'll do it right now. I'm not going to make this hypothetical. All this has been personal, so I'm not a doctor. but let me just, speaking as somebody who's had some experience with this, let me tell you what I would do if I were you. I would go to a psychologist. I would see if they agree if you have depression. I don't particularly like psychiatrists, but you need a psychiatrist to prescribe the medication. So I would go to a psychologist. If the psychologist says, yes, you seem to be clinically depressed, find somebody you like, because if you don't like them, it's not going to work. Then go to a psychiatrist, get the prescription, get the medication. The medication will stabilize your mood and will help quite a lot. But the problem is that by the time you're old enough to do this, you have so many scripts that you're reacting to. In your subconscious, there are so many things that you've been doing for so long that are just scripts. And you will never clear those out with medication. Medication will never, ever clear the scripts, the emotional stimuli that are causing you to have these kind of reactions. And so get the medication, because the medication will help. It will help you from doing more damage, and it will make you easier, make things psychologically more manageable for you to start doing the hard work, because the hard work is not the antidepressants. The hard work is, once you're stabilized and manageable, then you have to do something that I think, not to sound self-serving, because I'm not the only person in this boat, but I think what you have to do after that is you have to do the one thing that requires more courage than anything anyone ever has required human beings to do. You have to take a flashlight and you have to go down into that basement in the back of your head where all those little red eyes are gleaming at you in the darkness, all those little red-eyed rats running around down there. You are going to have to take, if you ever want to get out of this, if you ever want to get free of it, you're going to have to take a flashlight with a guide, and you're going to have the courage to go down into that basement and shine that light around and see what's there. Because the depression is the symptom of stuff that you do not want to look at. And you will always be a puppet that will be responding to things that happened to you in your childhood until the day you die. Your relationship with women will be based on what you're looking for from your parents. Your relationship with men will be based on what you're looking for with parents. If you have a history of dating people that are bad for you, you will continue to do that until the day you die. Medication's not going to help that. But if you have the courage and you have an appropriate, talented, loving, gifted therapist to take you through this, you will eventually reach the point. You'll eventually reach the point where you will be willing to do this. And then life suddenly starts to get very, very, very good. Because what you'll find if you do this work, and it's years and years and years and years and years, but if you do it, if you have the courage to go down into the basement and shine that flashlight around, you will eventually find out what these triggers are. And then for the first time in your life, you will be able to have emotional stimulus that you know would have brought you down. It just brought you down. I don't have to explain this to you. Other people won't understand it, but I have to explain it to you. The kind of stuff that will just bring you down, collapse the whole personality for a week or a month or a year or whatever. When you understand what the connection is, it will not bring you down. And you will be able to do something that is not as good as having been raised well, but is better than being where you are. You will feel that emotional stimulation, and you will tend to want to fall right back into that hole. But what is going to happen is, instead of walking around looking through the trees and the jungles, instead of walking through the jungles looking around, a landmine blows up. Oh, what the hell was that? Oh, hey, the same landmine. Oh, another one, the same landmine. For the first time in your life, you're going to walk along in this jungle and you're going to look down on the ground and you're going to say, that's a tripwire. And if I kick that, I know what's going to happen. And when you feel that thing happen, you're going to say, no, this is not what's really happening. What's really happening is I am reacting to something that happened to me when I was 5 or 7 or 9 or whatever. It's not real. It's not real. What I'm reacting to here is not real. If this person is angry with me and I feel this sudden kind of mad anxiety coming on, it's not that. It's you're reacting to your father. You're reacting to the chaos. You're reacting to something. It's not real. And so you will never, ever develop the kind of natural sense of self-respect that people who don't have these problems have. But you will, without question, you will live a life full of happiness and joy, because you will realize that this is a stimulant. You realize it's somebody's pushing a button, and you will stop it. And what this is called is reparenting. You're going to have to parent yourself. You never had the kind of parents you should. You never had. They missed something. You missed something. You didn't get the kind of love and support and nurturing and affection that you should have gotten between the ages of 1 and 5. You've been looking for it for your entire life, and you have to do it for yourself. You're going to have to be your own parent, and you're going to have to take care of yourself, and you will. And you'll see things that used to be the same trap that you would fall into again and again and again and again and again and again and again. And one day something's going to happen with enough therapy and with a little medication, and you're going to see this thing, and I'm not saying you won't do it. You'll do it. But you won't fall into the hole. And I actually coined a phrase that I like very much. And I think this really sums it up. If you suffer from this kind of mental illness, and have suffered from it for your entire life, you know that there are certain things that happen to you, certain stimuli, certain something or other. And if you hit that stimuli, it will send you a searing pain that goes right through the heart of you. It's just a searing pain. But take my word for this. Take my word for this. There is genuine hope. If you do this, if you have the courage to do this, and you're willing to do the work over years, you will get to a point where it doesn't hurt anymore. And here's my little phrase. I was talking to my therapist about this on Monday, 2 days ago, because I still go. I go every week. And now that I go every week, I'm not putting fires out anymore. The house isn't burning down anymore. Things are under control now, which means that instead of me having to deal with crises and emergencies, psychological turmoil, no. My life has been manageable for couple years now. Now, what I do is I go into the basement and I look at the rotted foundation, and every week I go in there and do little repairs. I splice this, I paint that, I fix this. This whole wood section's completely full of dry rot. Okay, let's cut it out and replace it. Let's put some braces up there. Let's do whatever we have to do. But the little turn of phrase, Elisa, I don't know if you're in this place now, but believe me, you can get there if you try. I was telling her about a stimulus, the kind of stimulus that used to just knock me off my perch. And I said to her, Peggy, it didn't hurt. It itched, but it didn't hurt. And that's where you'll get to. You'll get to the place where it itches. You'll get to the place where it's like, this is the kind of thing. This is the kind of thing that used to destroy me. And now I recognize it. It doesn't destroy me. It doesn't hurt anymore. It itches. I'm aware of it, but it itches. It doesn't hurt. You're going to want to get to a place where it only itches. And the more you do this, the less it itches. And so that's what I do. And it works like a charm. And it took me 50 years. But I got there. I really did. And I'll tell you one last thing, Elisa, because this is the spot of good news in all this. And I'm talking to you, but it could be to your friends or whoever else is listening to this. I'll tell you one other thing. If you are one of the few people who have been through this kind of torture for decades, and you find a way to get to the other side of this, you will be a stronger person than not just a stronger person than you were. You'll be a stronger person than the average person. You will come out of this invincible. You will come out of this with a term I used applied to something else, but you will come out of this with a bulletproof mind. And the thing I'll close with is this. The finest steel in the world was made for samurai swords. And the reason that a samurai sword was so remarkable was not because the steel was so hard, although it was incredibly hard steel. The reason that the samurai swords were so remarkable is that they were extremely hard, took a very, very, very sharp edge. So it wasn't supple, it wasn't soft, but they were flexible. In other words, it was hard, but it was flexible. And samurai swords had the ability to be incredibly rigid and at the same time incredibly flexible. Here's what's interesting about that. Why Why is that? How did they get that? How did they get something that strong that yet could bend and not shatter? Well, the way they make those swords is, listen carefully now, those of you out there suffering from this. What they do is they take a piece of iron or steel, and they would hammer it out flat. They get it to about the length of the sword that they wanted, and they just hammer it out flat. And then what they would do while that iron and the steel was red hot is they would fold the steel over. They'd fold it over onto itself, and then they'd hammer it out flat. So now you've got what was once a piece of flat steel folded over and then hammered. You had to be red hot to do that. Red hot, that steel. But once they folded it over and hammered it out, then they would put that steel into ice cold water. And that ice cold water would metallurgically change the steel. And then they would take that piece of steel and they would heat it red hot again until it was virtually molten, just so it was soft. And then they would fold it over again, and they'd hammer it out again, and then they'd stick it into freezing cold water again. And then they would pull it out, and they'd get it red hot to the point where it could barely, it was just about melting, and then they'd hammer it and hammer it and hammer it and fold it and hammer it and hammer it, and then they'd stick it in freezing cold water again. And the best samurai swords had that done to them 17 times. 17 times. So, if you are worried about this, and if you think that there's no way to get through it, you can get through it, and you can get through it and come out on the other side stronger than other people. Because if you've been through this and you have the courage to go on this path, you will be one of those people that have been heated up, beaten up, frozen, heated up, beaten up, frozen, put in the fire, hit with a hammer, frozen. Once you've gone through that many times, you come out on the other side of that, you're bulletproof. You are bulletproof. There's nothing that you're not afraid of. There's nothing that you're afraid of. You go from being afraid of everything to being afraid of nothing. I'm not afraid of anything anymore. Why am I having this conversation with you guys? Why am I talking about this? This is about as personal as information gets. Why do I... somebody said it's up to 12,000 folds, and they certainly know better than I do. Why am I talking about this? Why do I do what I do? A guy like me who suffered from depression, low self-esteem for the first 2/3, 3/4 of his life. Why do I do it? I do it because I'm not afraid of anything anymore. I'm just not afraid of it. I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not afraid to die. I'm not afraid to live. I'm not afraid of what people say. I'm not afraid of what the NSA may be thinking. I'm just not afraid of anything. I'm not afraid of people finding out my deepest, darkest secrets, because I know my deepest, darkest secrets. I'm okay with my own deepest, darkest secrets. So I don't give a damn what other people learn about me or think about me. I don't care. I got to a place over a long period of time and after an awful lot of work where I'm very, very happy with who I am, very proud of what I do, and very comfortable in my own skin. And it was a long and ongoing journey, and it's probably never going to end, but you can reach a place of fearlessness and happiness. Genuine happiness, kind of happiness that appreciates happiness. So I'm not in any danger. If I have really run away, I'm already more successful than I'd ever imagined I could be. I'm already more famous than I ever imagined I could be. I've lived a better life than I ever imagined was possible for me. But you could put me into the Hollywood machine and start throwing $40, $50, $100 million at me and surround me by all these temptations, and I'm not going to fall for it. I'm inoculated. I'm saved. I'm protected. I've been there. So, that's the answer to that question, Elisa. And if it helped you at all, you can thank Kevin. Let's see what else we got. We got about, only have another 20 minutes, but that was worth talking about. I love those kind of things. Let's see, number 4, highest ranking question from Matt Hindelang. If you could have any superpower, what would it be? And not the power to have all powers. That'd be flying. I love to fly so much. I do. I really just love to fly. And I think the ability to fly like Superman would be great. I thought the new Superman movie, Man of Steel, was just awful. It's just an inversion of everything Superman's supposed to be. I'm not a comic book guy, but I thought it was awful. And the only part of that movie that I actually really enjoyed, that made me filled with joy, was was when he was flying for the first time. He was so joyful, and that's what I would do. I'd like to have the power to fly at will, just like that. Now, you can get pretty close because you can fly airplanes, you can fly aerobatics, you can fly gliders, especially if you're flying in a glider. I still have that picture here. No. And I say about flying in a glider is, especially if you're close to mountains or something and you're careful and you know what you're doing, then there's no noise, there's no engine, there's no vibration, there's no nothing. It's just you and nature. And you have to be paying attention to things like wind and especially lift. You're flying like a bird is flying. You have to be thinking about where you are. So flying gliders, especially in a mountainous region in the winter in the snow, is damn near real flying. But that would be it, Matt. That's the honest answer. Just flying came first to my mind, and I can't think of anything else that I really would like to have. It'd just be about it. It'd be nice to be bulletproof, because if I was bulletproof, I would enjoy walking places where I don't feel comfortable walking now. I'd enjoy walking through inner cities, and I'd enjoy walking through, markets in Karachi, and, I'd enjoy going places where I was really hated and despised. I'd like to just be there and hear it and feel it and figure out what's going on firsthand. But it's flying all the way, I'm afraid. Sorry to say. A little predictable. Okay, Susan Speakman, looks like it was number 5, and said, okay, trying again, sorry if this is a duplicate. Given the current crop of rhinos, middle-of-the-roaders, conservatives, and Tea Party folks, whom do you currently see as sterling 2016 presidential material? Please don't limit yourself to only those currently in office. I know this is going to be kind of the set-piece answer, but of all the people I see out there now, there's only 2 that I find hopeful because of their courage, and one of them is Rand Paul, and the other one is Ted Cruz. Now, I am very, very mindful of Reagan's 11th commandment. I don't see anybody else out there right now. I've always maintained that the perfect presidential candidate would be somebody who came from the pop culture, because the last conservative president candidate that we had came from the pop culture. Ronald Reagan knew how to communicate because Ronald Reagan was an actor, and Ronald Reagan was likable. But the thing nobody really realizes about Ronald Reagan is that people loved Ronald Reagan for 20 years. Before Ronald Reagan ever ran for office, he came pre-loved. If George Clooney ran for office, he'd have that exact same benefit. But I think it's either Cruz or Rand Paul in terms of their principles. They both have courage. They both have the courage to stand up for what they believe in, even if they're by themselves. But when I said I don't want to really violate Reagan's 11th Amendment about thou shalt not criticize other Republicans, I've met both Rand Paul and Ted Cruz. And so with it clearly understood that I admire them both very much personally. I think both of them have somewhat serious problems with charisma, and Rand more than Ted. Rand Paul was in a small group I was in a large lobby, and there were a small group of people gathered around me. Not because it was me so much, it was just a small group of people. And I thought Rand Paul had less personal charisma than anyone I'd ever seen. I mean, I really thought he was a waiter or something. He's quite a short guy. That's a disadvantage in politics, because so much of politics is visual. So many people on our team say it doesn't matter all this artsy nonsense. No, it matters a lot. Image matters a lot. I wish it didn't, but it does. They say that in an election, the tall guy wins virtually every time. There's very few exceptions to that rule. The taller person tends to win. I don't know. It's just wired. You can't do much about that, but Rand is not. Rand, the time I saw him, does not have any alpha qualities, and you have to be an alpha male to be the president of the United States, present company accepted. He's portrayed as an alpha, but he's not. Barack Obama walks out, he has a great smile, and he's got this kind of glamorous presence, right? He's glamorous, but he's not an alpha male. No one's ever stood up to him. Everybody's basically fallen down at his feet. But if you got into an argument with Barack Obama, a serious argument, he'd start to cry. So Rand doesn't project a lot of charisma. Ted Cruz does. Ted Cruz is a much more charismatic person. Ted's a giant guy, a big guy, and Ted has a much more presence. I've seen both of these guys up close. I mean, like, this close. But the problem with Ted, and Ted's problem is a much more solvable problem. Ted is kind of a nerd. He comes off as kind of a nerd, and that's a good thing, because when I say he's a nerd, he's very friendly. He's very joking. He's goofy, is what it is. He's got a goofiness to him, and I admire that, actually. But he doesn't have that, I am the commander-in-chief, and I carry the football with me, and if I am in a bad mood, then some country is going to go away. That's what you really need for the President of the United States. Again, Barack Obama doesn't have this. Now, Rick Perry's got alpha in spades, but Rick suffers from George Bush syndrome. That is that English is not his first language. He doesn't have a first language. You have to be able to communicate. Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, but Ted is especially brilliant. Ted Cruz is a brilliant guy, and Ted Cruz is a courageous guy, and Ted Cruz understands the principles. So if I were going to say, it would be Ted Cruz. If I had a chance to work with Ted, I would I'd change his hairstyle, I'd change the way he dresses, and I'd get him more focused. I'd get him more alpha. I'd get him more projecting. I'd have him more serious. I'd have him more ruthless, is the word I'm looking for. See from the comments, a couple of people see Scott Walker. I think Walker's a real shot. I've never met him. I don't know anything about him personally, but I'd love Scott Walker. What he did in Wisconsin was enormous courage. Enormous courage. Physical, personal courage. We're going to kill you. Okay, do your worst, jackass. That kind of courage I like very much. But no, I think it's one of those two guys. My friend Alan West, of course, is an extremely capable guy. I just don't know if Alan really wants to run. He's told me several times he doesn't. I don't know if he does. That may have been a blind, but I don't know. Alan, on the other hand, now you want to talk about alpha male. Alan West is the real deal. Alan, I walked into a room with Alan West. He's a mountain of a guy. He's not super tall, but he's just solid as a piece of granite, and he projects that. When you're talking to Alan West, Alan West is like, all right, I don't want to piss you off, Alan, because I don't want you to nuke my country. That's what you need in a president. So I'd say one of those three. And the only reason I put Alan in there in the first part was I'm not sure that he's told me specifically he doesn't want to run for office again, but that may have been a blind. And by the way, that was a year ago. Maybe he's changed his mind. So that would be my answer to that, Susan. So we're still early yet. Let's find out. But I'd love to see somebody come out of the woodwork. And I think the American people are ready for that. I think the American people would like somebody to literally come out of the woodwork. Who are you? Never seen him before. What do you got to say? Well, this, and this. Wow. Okay, makes sense. I'm gonna do a firewall next week, and I'm gonna make it about this new messaging and the kind of situation we find ourselves in with this kind of media headwinds. So I'll get to that. So let's see. Next one. Jim Reinheimer. I have limited funds to contribute toward political causes, and I'm having difficulty deciding where I can get the most bang for the buck. Tea Party, local candidates for state legislature, Bill Whittle, GOP. I'm going to give you an honest answer on this one, buddy. I'm going to go with Bill Whittle on this. And the reason I'm telling you that I'm giving you an honest answer on this is because me asking for money and asking for subscriptions from people is so profoundly against my nature to ask people for financial help, for even if they're getting something in exchange for it. It runs very, very counter to how I was raised and to what I consider to be, just good manners, I guess, more than anything. The subscription thing that we're doing at BillWhittle.com is critical, and if I didn't believe in it, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have taken anybody's money. But to constantly go out there and ask for subscribers is hard for me. It's very, very, very hard for me to do that. But the reason I would say Bill Whittle is because, as we learned earlier in our show today, I've had the living stuffing beaten out of me for 40 years, mostly by myself. I have learned genuine, honest-to-God, real humility in that time. And it's a hard thing for somebody with that background to ask for support. But first of all, I'll answer your question in two ways. From the personal way is, if I didn't believe that BillWhittle.com was the best way to spend your money, I wouldn't be able to take your money. I genuinely actually believe that it would be the best bang for your buck. So let me explain to you why I think it's the best bang for our buck. We're a party and a movement. This whole conservative idea makes so much sense. It's so obvious. And it's not just obvious, and it's not just obvious in the sense that broccoli is better for you than candy, because it is better for you than candy, but it's not obvious that it's better for you than candy. Nobody wants to eat broccoli. Everybody wants to eat candy. My point about the conservative message is we are about personal freedom and fast cars and hot women and guns and explosions and flying through space and going to the moon. I mean, if you can't sell freedom and speed and hotness and, all the stuff we like is the stuff that's fun. They're the ones that are talking about the algae cakes and the limited future and the small or the no growth and the doing with less. And you hurt my feelings. How do we not win by 90% of the vote every time? Our message, our principles are so easy to sell, but the salesmanship is so shockingly bad. It's just unbelievable how awful we bungle this message every single time. This government shutdown thing, this policy is funded by this. First of all, why doesn't John Boehner come up and say, my understanding of the Constitution, which I presumably have some interest in, being the Speaker of the House, is that every single spending bill has to originate in the House. And Obamacare originated in the Senate, so we're fighting it on constitutional legal grounds because it's a violation of the law. Forget about what we think about it, what it's going to do to the health care of the country. It's not just against the law, it's against the entire principle of this country, right? So that's the first thing. People don't know how to defend these ideas. And somebody has to, and I keep looking for somebody to do it better, and I can't find anybody who does it better than me. That's a hard thing for a guy like me to say, believe it or not. I know a lot of people think, oh, yeah. But genuinely, for me to come out and say, I don't know anybody who knows how to do this messaging better than me, is the truth. I don't know of anyone who knows how to do this messaging better than me. There are a lot of people smarter than me. There are guys like Soul, and we talked about these earlier, these guys, Thomas Soul and David Horowitz, who I've worked with before. These people are brilliant. I'm a good synthesist. I can make a case out of stuff, and I'm smart enough to understand what the case is. But everybody has their specialty, and I know how to message this stuff. I know how to explain things to people. Even when I was teaching astronomy, I knew how to take something that's complex and difficult and with lots of moving parts and explain it in a way that everybody could connect to. That's the one skill I've always had. And that's why I think that subscribing to BillWhittle.com is your best bang for the buck, because it enables me to go out there and teach these other people how to sell the message. It's just the message. It's just the message. We don't have to think of a new philosophy. We don't have to come up with a new kind of economics. We don't have to figure out a method for people to govern themselves. All this stuff's been done. How do you not sell freedom? How incompetent do you have to be not be able to sell freedom to a free people? I just don't understand it. So honestly, Jim, I could not put my name in there if you hadn't. But since you did, that's my answer. So if it is within your means and you want to finish watching the Stratosphere Lounge, go over to BillWhittle.com, click the orange button. If you can do it, great. That would really help. It would give us the means to do this. Memberships are doing pretty well. We haven't had large numbers of traffic driven to the site yet. We've been kind of let the thing roll out. We opened it up for you guys and for the Facebook people, knocked the bugs out of it. Some things were later than we thought. They just weren't ready. But now they are. So now it's time to start promoting that virtual presidency thing and start getting people there. And it's going to succeed. It's already succeeded very, very well. Given the total number of people that have visited the site, the number of conversions we're getting is incredible. It really genuinely is incredible. It's shocking how many people we're able to convert when we look at the numbers we have. But we need bigger numbers. We need more people. That's all there is to it. So if you can do it, I'd appreciate it. And the small group of people that we have working here would appreciate it. And I think we can make a big, 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 big difference out there. So that'd be my answer. 725. I got one more I think I can do. I'll just take it in order. Only reason I was hesitating because there's not much I can do with this question. But this will be the last one for the night. Ricky Foshi says, hey, Bill, why not try and partner with Beck on the virtual presidency thing? I think your clips would play well on his new network and drive lots of like minds to you. Also, he has that very realistic copy of the Oval Office on his set. I'm sure you could use that set and save yourself some of those $16,000 days and whatever it costs for a high-end compositor. Let me answer the second half of that question first. I'm pretty sure I have this somewhere. Hang on a second. Yeah. Hang on a sec here. Okay. That's done with me against a green screen. The actual desk is the Resolute desk prop that they used on the West Wing. And the flags were behind me and the curtains were behind me. But the windows and everything else is not. I think that looks better than any set I've ever seen. I just absolutely love it. I love it. I think it looks better than Glenn Beck's set. No offense, Glenn. I think it's beautiful. So, and when I said it was a $16,000 day, it was a $16,000 day. But that $16,000 meant 11 segments. So that's, what's it, $1,400 to $1,200 a segment. That's a really, really good price. Your bucks go a long way here at BillWhittle.com. So I'm not so much worried about the money aspect of it because that's going to get us 6 months worth of content and a DVD. And when it's time to do another one, we'll have the means to do that with your support, which we're getting. Although we could always use more. So let me go to the first part of the question. Why not try and partner with Glenn Beck? I would love to partner with Glenn Beck. I had a conversation with Meredith Jessup, who's one of his editors over at The Blaze. She was asking about the Afterburner script that I did on Common Core. And I told her the Afterburner will be up on Thursday, should be available tomorrow. I'll post a link on Facebook, post a link on BillWhittle.com. I'll send her the link. And I said to her, by the way, Meredith, I have personally met, I think, just about everybody in this movement. I haven't met Mark Stein, but I think I've met just about everybody else in this movement personally, except for Glenn. And when he played Eat the Rich in its entirety on the radio show, I was about as happy as a person could be. I was just beaming like a kid. So I'd like to remedy that someday soon. And she said, next time you're in Dallas, let me know. We'll make it happen. So it's probably worth a trip to Dallas. Glenn's a genius, and The Blaze is terrific. There are some negotiations underway to have the virtual presidency run on FoxNews.com. Needless to say, I'd rather be there. There's a much bigger audience, and I purposely produced these videos to not only be something you could be proud of on the web, I produced them to a level where they could be airable on national network television. They are 1080p high definition, and they look great. Great. So that's the answer to that question. If it turns out the FoxNews.com connection doesn't go through, I will definitely offer them to Glenn. I can't imagine a person I'd rather work with. Glenn Beck is a real hero of mine. He's not just a hero of mine because of his conservative viewpoints and the way he articulates them. He's a master. I told you a few moments ago that I think I'm the best person in the business for messaging. I still believe that's true. I understand aspects of the message that Glenn doesn't understand. Glenn understands the philosophy certainly as well as I do, probably much better than I do. In fact, certainly he knows it better than I do. He articulates it for 3 hours a day, every day. But there are things that I do understand, I think, not only better than Beck, I think I understand better than anybody. I understand lighting, I understand editing, I understand music, I understand stagecraft, I understand all of the subconscious elements of storytelling. I understand narratives, I understand narrative arcs, I understand fiction. That's where I'm good. So if Glenn Beck gets a chance to see him and wants to run him, deal. And I will move on that Glenn Beck connection as soon as these other things, which are pre-existing connections, as soon as those are run their course one way or another, then I'm going to fly my butt out to Dallas and say hi to Glenn, who I think is a genius, and he's a hero. He's a hero of mine, certainly. And I got a little off track there, which is not uncommon for me. The other thing I'll say about Glenn Beck that I admire enormously is that Glenn Beck has made a ton of money on the internet. So, man, his business savvy is super, super brilliant. Keith Olbermann and Glenn Beck used to be antipodes of each other on network TV. Glenn was on Fox and Olbermann was on MSNBC. And they both left more or less the same time, within 6 months or a year of each other, something like that. Olbermann is sitting on park benches in New York City throwing breadcrumbs to pigeons, and Beck Beck has an empire. Beck not only has the Blaze, Beck not only has Blaze TV, but he is going to move that onto your television screen. He's going to move it onto network television. He's going to get it on satellite, and then he's going to be doing the one thing that I don't know why no one else does, and that is get out there to the right of Fox News. Fox has been drifting left and left and left, but Fox News has so much market share because they're the most right thing out there. We still outnumber these people, 2-1 in this country. And everybody's trying to say, we want to be like Fox, but we don't want to be quite as conservative as Fox. And I'm thinking, what's the matter with you people? Go to the right of Fox, for God's sakes. Put some real solid, non-stop 24-hour conservatives out there. Now, if Glenn Beck does that, and he's going to, he will. He'll succeed. Glenn Beck will succeed because he's a success. Glenn Beck will succeed because he's a winner. And happy coincidence based on what we spent almost all of the show talking about. But Glenn Beck will succeed because Glenn Beck was an alcoholic. Glenn Beck knows what it's like to sit on the floor of his house for months and not get anything done and think your life is over. I thought my life was over when I was 40. I thought I was done. I thought everything I wanted to do was behind me. I was a guy with a great future behind me. And then I wrote an essay called Honor on a little tiny unknown blog called Eject, 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 and my connection with you people saved my life. Saved my life. So Glenn Beck's going to succeed. And to the degree that I can help him succeed, I'd love to. He doesn't need my help. But if my programming helps Glenn succeed, then certainly, without any question, Glenn helps me succeed. So there we go. And look at the time. It's 7:32. We've been on the air for 1 hour and 38 minutes. That probably includes the musical walk-in. But I have a place I have to go. So anyway, this was a fun show. These are the kind of things I like to talk about because I have no other place to talk about these things. So anytime anybody wants to get to those personal questions about issues that are bothering you, to the degree that I can help you, maybe you think it's therapy radio. It probably is. It's certainly better therapy for me than it is for you. But I wasn't kidding, Elisa, what I said earlier about if you have the courage to do this, if you have the courage to go down into the basement of your own soul and go where it's the darkest and go where it's the scariest, and if you have the guts to walk down those stairs with a flashlight and look around, you will be able to do anything. You will not be afraid of anything. And that is liberating in a way that I don't think anybody else in the world experiences. I don't think anybody else out there in the world, even normal people, know what it's like to reach that level of freedom. That level of freedom. That level of, I just don't care. I don't care. I don't have anything to hide. Isn't that great? I don't want anybody to find out about this, or if somebody found out about that, or I don't care. I don't care. I got a lot of stuff that I'm not proud of, but somebody asks me about it, they're going to get an honest answer. I'm not going to run from it. I got nothing to hide. I have nothing to hide. And since I have nothing to hide, I have nothing to fear. So I'm not a guy like Herman Cain who, I don't know why I picked on Herman Cain. I only picked on Herman Cain because he was a Republican. Ted Kennedy had all these affairs and basically drowned a girl. But Herman Cain had a lot to hide, and how do you go through life like that? I don't know. Anyway, what a great show. I enjoyed this one more than just about anything I've done in a long time. I much prefer these personal things than the political stuff, although I'm certainly happy to do the political stuff till the cows come home. If we can get those subscriptions up, we can't do it quite yet, but if we can get those subscriptions up, we will be doing that Cavemen in the Man Cave show, which I kind of want to call the Stratosphere Lounge Live or something. I love the name so much. But we'll be doing this for forever. Some form of this forever. And that's that. So, as usual, thank you very much for your support. Thank you for watching the show. Thank you for the subscribers, those of you that are subscribers. And if you're not, and you can't because of financial constraints, for God's sakes, please understand that if there's anybody in the world who understands what it's like to not have enough money to do the things you want to do in your life, this is the guy. You just watching the show and you just being on the Facebook page and just seeing a number here that's on the that's on my Ustream thing. I mean, right now there's 267 people watching. If you're one of those people, or if you watch on YouTube, you don't owe me anything. I'm happy to be in this fight. I'm happy to be a voice for people because this is not my story. It's a much bigger story than me, and somebody needs to tell it. But if you are a subscriber, you have our deepest appreciation and thanks for all of your financial support. So we'll see you out there on Facebook land, trying to do an update a day. I've got an update I'm going to have to do tonight somehow, I guess, and get it out there. But I'm very, 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 very proud of this new website. I love the way it looks. I love the graphics. I love everything. And I've been wondering why my likes have gone through the ceiling. It seems like I was at 37,000 a week ago, and now I'm at 39,240 or something like that. And the reason I'm getting these likes is because I'm putting out 2 things a day. So anyway, it's great. Thanks for joining us as always. Thanks again for your support. I wouldn't be in the chair without you. I wouldn't be living this life of grammar. Well, I also live a life of grammar, and glamour and ease. And I suppose you can't really wrap a show up like this without thanking our veterans who, especially those of you who are watching this, who've gone and slept in cold and dangerous and hot and dangerous places so that I didn't have to. I never forget about it. I never do. I never once forget about the sacrifices that you make so that I don't have to worry about getting home in one piece. So that's that. Episode 44 of the Stratosphere Lounge now comes to a glorious close. We'll see you next week. Take care now, everybody. Bye-bye.